In the misty heart of the Pacific Northwest, where ancient Douglas firs loomed like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches clawing at the low-hanging fog, four friends embarked on their annual Halloween adventure. It was October 31st, 2025, and the air carried the sharp tang of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, something metallic, almost acrid, that none of them could place. The Olympic National Forest, a sprawling wilderness of jagged peaks and shadowed valleys, was their destination, chosen not for its beauty, but for its secrets. Whispers on obscure forums and half-forgotten local legends spoke of portals opening on All Hallows' Eve, thin places where the veil between worlds frayed, where the supernatural didn't just whisper, but screamed. The group, Alex, Jamie, Riley, and Taylor, had been chasing thrills together since their college days at the University of Washington, each bringing their own flavor to the ritual. Alex, a wiry software engineer from Seattle, was the skeptic, quick to dismantle ghost stories with logic and data, though his pulse raced at the thought of the unknown. His sharp green eyes scanned the world like code, searching for bugs, but he'd never admit how much he craved the adrenaline of these trips. Jamie, the Portland artist with ink-stained fingers, filled her sketchbooks with cryptids and shadowy figures, her dark hair perpetually tied back with a bandana as she muttered about Bigfoot sightings and ley lines. The group, Alex, Jamie, Riley, and Taylor, had been chasing thrills together since their college days at the University of Washington, each bringing their own flavor to the ritual. Alex, a wiry software engineer from Seattle, was the skeptic, quick to dismantle ghost stories with logic and data, though his pulse raced at the thought of the unknown. His sharp green eyes scanned the world like code, searching for bugs, but he'd never admit how much he craved the adrenaline of these trips. Jamie, the Portland artist with ink-stained fingers, filled her sketchbooks with cryptids and shadowy figures, her dark hair perpetually tied back with a bandana as she muttered about Bigfoot sightings and ley lines. She believed fervently, unshakably, in things unseen. Riley, the Vancouver-born outdoorsman, moved through the wild with the ease of someone raised in the Cascades, his broad shoulders carrying a pack stuffed with gear and his calm demeanor masking a restless curiosity. Then there was Taylor, the Tacoma storyteller, whose honeyed voice could make a campfire tale feel like a confession. Her eyes gleamed with mischief and a hint of fear as they planned this trip over pints of dark ale in a dimly lit Tacoma dive bar. "Halloween's the night," Taylor had said, leaning forward, her voice low and conspiratorial. "The Quinault people say the forest wakes up. Portals open and things slip through. Ghosts, spirits, and worse. We need to find one." They started at dawn from the trailhead near Lake Quinault, their boots crunching on gravel that's slick from the morning dew. The forest swallowed them almost immediately, its canopy dimming the weak October sunlight to a ghostly half-light. Their packs were heavy with essentials, lightweight tents that could withstand a squall, sleeping bags rated for the bone-chilling cold of high altitude, a jet boil stove for quick meals, energy bars, headlamps with fresh batteries, and 2 battered flasks of spiked apple cider with a kick of cinnamon passed around for courage when the shadows grew long. The trail climbed steeply through fern-choked undergrowth where mist curled like spectral fingers around moss-draped boulders. Streams, swollen from recent rains, gurgled with an almost human cadence, as if murmuring secrets just out of earshot. The maples blazed in fiery reds and golds, their leaves drifting down like embers, while the evergreens stood eternal, their needles hissing in a wind that seemed to carry faint, disjointed whispers. By midday, they'd ascended 1,500 feet, their breaths puffing in the crisp air as they reached a rocky viewpoint overlooking the Hoh River Valley. The emerald ribbon of the river snaked below, half obscured by fog that clung to the landscape like a shroud. They dropped their packs, stretching sore muscles, and Riley handed out protein bars while Alex fiddled with his phone, trying to capture the view. The photo didn't do it justice. The valley seemed to pulse, as if the earth itself were breathing. "Feel that?" Jamie asked, her voice hushed, almost reverent. She zipped her fleece jacket to her chin, though her shiver had little to do with the cold. Her dark eyes darted to the tree line, where the mist seemed to writhe, forming shapes that vanished when stared at directly. The air's charged, like static before a storm. This is it, guys. Portal energy. Alex snorted, shoving his phone into his pocket. Portal energy? Come on, Jamie, you sound like a dumbass. It's just fog and low pressure. Basic meteorology. But his grin faltered as he glanced at the forest behind them, where a single crow cawed, a sharp, guttural sound that echoed too long in the stillness. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit, and muttered, "Still, it's creepy as hell out here." Riley, crouching to inspect a set of tracks in the damp earth, frowned.
Guys, check this out. There's no way these are from a bear," he said, his voice steady but laced with unease. The prints were large, too large, with an odd, elongated shape that didn't match anything he'd seen in his years of hiking. Could be a hoax, but... He trailed off, brushing his fingers over the edges of the tracks, which seemed to sink unnaturally deep into the soil, as if whatever made them carried an impossible weight. "Hoax my ass!" Jamie snapped, kneeling beside him, her sketchbook already open. She traced the outline of the print with a pencil, her hands trembling slightly. "This is real. You know the stories. Shapeshifters, skinwalkers, things that don't belong. The Quinault elders say they come out when the veil's thin." Taylor, leaning against a boulder, smirked, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the mist. "Oh, let's not forget the hikers," she said, her voice low and deliberate, drawing the group's attention like a magnet. "The ones who vanish in these woods on foggy nights. Poof, no trace. Then some show up weeks later, babbling about lights in the trees, voices calling their names, paths that loop back on themselves. One guy swore he saw his own face staring back from the fog, but it wasn't him." "Cut it out, Taylor," Alex said, but his voice cracked, betraying the unease crawling up his spine. He busied himself with his pack, checking the straps, but his eyes kept flicking to the forest, where the trees seemed to lean inward, their branches forming an archway that led to darkness. "You're just trying to freak us out." "Am I?" Taylor's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Did you hear that sound when we got here? It was like someone humming just beyond the parking lot." Jamie's head snapped up, her pencil freezing mid-sketch. "You heard that too?" Her voice was barely audible, her face pale. "I thought it was the wind, but it had a tune, like a lullaby, but wrong." Riley stood, brushing dirt from his hands, his usual calm fraying at the edges. "Okay, enough. We're spooking ourselves. Let's keep moving. There's a clearing a mile up where we can set up for the night." But as he hoisted his pack, he froze, his head tilting as if catching a sound. For a moment, the group held their breath, straining to hear. The forest was silent. Too silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, just a heavy, oppressive stillness that pressed against their eardrums. Then, from somewhere deep in the mist, a faint hum drifted toward them, a low, melodic drone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't an animal, it was deliberate, almost human, but warped, like a record played at the wrong speed. Alex's mouth went dry. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his logic crumbling under the weight of the sound. Jamie clutched her sketchbook to her chest, her eyes wide. "It's calling us," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fascination. "The portal, it's open." Taylor's laugh was sharp, brittle, cutting through the hum. "Well then," she said, her eyes glinting with something unreadable, "let's go find it." As the sun sank deep into the hills, its dying light casting long, claw-like shadows that writhed across the forest floor like specters, the four friends reached their campsite, a secluded clearing perched atop a rocky ridge in the Olympic National Forest. Hemlocks, ancient and gnarled, ringed the site like silent watchers, their branches heavy with moss that dangled like tattered shrouds.
Below, a foggy abyss swallowed the Ho River Valley, the mist swirling as if alive, obscuring whatever lay in its depths. The clearing was perfect, utterly isolated, far from any road or trace of civilization, with a weathered fire ring of blackened stones left by long-gone adventurers. A faint, sour smell lingered in the air, not quite rot, but something older, primal, as if the earth itself were exhaling a warning. The temperature plummeted into the low 40s as twilight bled into dusk, the chill seeping through their layers and prickling their skin. They set up with practiced efficiency, moving quickly to ward off the creeping cold. Riley, his broad frame steady despite the uneven ground, pitched their 2 tents, bright orange domes that glowed faintly in the fading light, their stakes driven deep to hold against the gusts that moaned through the ridge. Alex, ever methodical, gathered kindling from fallen branches, his boots crunching on pine needles as he built a precise teepee of dry wood in the fire pit, muttering about friction coefficients under his breath.
Jamie unrolled their ground tarp with a snap, her artist's hands arranging foam pads and sleeping bags inside the tents, fluffing pillows with a care that felt almost ritualistic. She paused occasionally, glancing into the darkening woods, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Taylor, meanwhile, took charge of dinner, firing up the jet-boil stove with a hiss of blue flame. She boiled water for dehydrated chili, the savory aroma cutting through the forest's earthy musk, and sliced sharp cheddar and tart green apples on a collapsible cutting board. For dessert, she passed around pumpkin-spiced granola bars, the sweetness cloying against the growing unease in the air. As night enveloped them, they huddled around the crackling fire, its flames licking at marshmallows skewered on whittled sticks. The scent of wood smoke mingled with the forest's damp perfume, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill that seemed to radiate from the trees themselves. Stories flowed freely, each one edged with a nervous energy. Taylor, her voice low and hypnotic, spun a tale of a hiker who vanished in these woods, only to be found weeks later, mute and hollow-eyed, claiming the trees had whispered their name in a language they couldn't understand. Jamie, her sketchbook open on her lap, scribbled furiously, her pencil tracing swirling portals that seemed to pulse in the firelight. "They're out there," she murmured, half to herself, her eyes flicking to the underbrush, where shadows seemed to shift just beyond the glow. "Gates to somewhere else. You can feel it," Alex scoffed, sipping from the flask of spiked cider, its cinnamon bite sharp on his tongue. "If anything spooky happens tonight, I'm blaming this," he joked, shaking the flask. His laughter rang out, too loud in the stillness, and the others joined in, but it was brittle, a shield against the growing weight of the night. As full darkness descended, a hush fell over the group. Stars pierced the canopy overhead, unnaturally bright, like eyes watching from an impossible distance. A distant owl hooted, its call sharp and mournful, setting their nerves on edge. They sat in silence, ears straining for the paranormal signs they'd come to find. Ghostly footsteps, flickering lights, or the rumored hum of portals tearing open the fabric of reality. Then it began, a faint, rhythmic thump echoing from deeper in the woods, like the pulse of a buried heart. At first, they dismissed it as the wind rattling branches or a deer moving through the underbrush. But the sound grew steadier, more deliberate, a slow, resonant beat that seemed to vibrate in their chests. Riley, his usual calm fraying, cocked his head, his brow furrowing. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the fire's crackle. They froze, breaths held, straining to pinpoint the source, but the rustle of leaves and the snap of a twig nearby muddled their senses. The thump pulsed on, relentless, as if the forest itself were alive with it. Curiosity, laced with a reckless thrill, won over caution. "We're not just gonna sit here, right?" Taylor said, their eyes glinting with a mix of excitement and defiance. They grabbed their headlamp, the beam cutting a shaky path through the dark. Riley hesitated, then nodded, slinging his jacket over his shoulders. Jamie tucked her sketchbook into her pack, her fingers trembling as she zipped it shut. Alex, muttering about stupid ideas, followed suit, his headlamp casting jittery shadows on the trees. They ventured out, following the sound down a faint game trail that twisted through thick brambles, their thorns snagging at their clothes like grasping hands. The air grew heavier, the sour smell intensifying, now tinged with something metallic, like ozone before a storm. The beat grew louder, more defined, resolving into something impossible: music. Bass-heavy, upbeat, with synths and drums that thrummed through the ground, vibrating up their legs. It was alien yet familiar, like a song heard in a dream. "What the fuck?" Jamie muttered, her voice tight with disbelief. She pushed her bandana back, her eyes wide as they darted between the trees. "Sounds like someone's throwing a rave out here, in the middle of nowhere." Excitement bubbled up, overriding their fear. A secret Halloween party in the wilderness? It was too wild to resist. "Let's get closer," Taylor urged, their voice edged with a hunger that made Alex's skin crawl. They pushed ahead, their headlamp beams slicing through the fog, which seemed to pulse in time with the music. As they crept nearer, colored lights flickered through the trees, reds, blues, and greens pulsing in sync with the rhythm, casting eerie halos in the mist. Above, what they thought were drones zipped through the canopy, their beams sweeping the ground like spotlights at a concert. But the movements were too fluid, too erratic for machines, and a faint, high-pitched whine accompanied them, like nothing mechanical. The friends exchanged glances, their hearts pounding with a mix of thrill and dread. "This is it," Jamie whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "It's gotta be the portal." Alex opened his mouth to argue, but the words died as a chill ran through him, the kind that comes from being watched. Breaking through the final line of trees, they stumbled into a wide meadow, expecting to find revelers, costumed partiers dancing around a bonfire, speakers blasting EDM, maybe glow sticks and fog machines. Instead, their breath caught, their minds reeling at the impossible. "No, no, 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 what the actual fuck?" Jamie stammered, her voice a choked whisper as she stumbled back, her headlamp trembling in her grip. "What the fuck have we stumbled across?" The meadow was alive with a nightmare masquerade. Towering figures, Sasquatches, their matted fur glistening with dew, standing 7 feet tall with eyes like burning coals, swayed in a rhythmic circle, their massive feet pounding the earth to the beat, sending tremors through the ground. Mingling among them were sleek, silver-skinned beings, their elongated heads gleaming under the flickering lights, their 2 long limbs moving with an unnatural grace. Tentacle-like appendages waved glow orbs that pulsed in time with the music, casting sickly light across the scene. At knee-height, gnomes with gnarled faces and pointed hats scampered through the crowd, their beards trailing as they juggled luminescent mushrooms that left trails of sparkling spores. A massive bonfire roared at the center, its flames unnaturally green, casting shadows that twisted into shapes that didn't match their owners. Clawed hands, winged forms, things with too many limbs. The drones above weren't machines, but tiny saucer-shaped crafts, no bigger than frisbees, darting with playful menace. Their beams, now locking onto the intruders, bathed the friends in cold, invasive light, and a low hum emanated from them, resonating with the music in a way that made their teeth ache. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something sweeter, like overripe fruit, cloying and wrong. The music swelled, its beat now a visceral force, pulling at their bodies as if urging them to join the dance. "Guys," Alex croaked, his logic shattered, his hand gripping Riley's arm. This isn't right. We need to go, now." But Jamie was frozen, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and fascination, her sketchbook slipping from her fingers to the ground. "It's real," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The portal, it's open." Taylor's laugh was sharp, almost manic, her headlamp beam fixed on the scene. "We wanted the impossible," she said, her voice trembling with a strange exhilaration. "Well, here it is." Riley, his face pale, took a step back, his hand hovering over the knife at his belt. "Those things see us," he said, his voice low and urgent, "and I don't think they're happy we're here." As if in response, the music shifted, the beat slowing, growing heavier, more menacing. The glowing eyes of the Sasquatches turned toward them, unblinking, and the silver-skinned beings tilted their heads in unison, their featureless faces somehow conveying curiosity and hunger. The gnomes stopped juggling, their cackles dying into a chilling silence, and the tiny UFOs hovered closer, their beams tightening into pinpoints that burned against the friend's skin. All at once, the meadow fell into an unnatural silence. The now menacing music cut off mid-drop, as if a cosmic DJ had yanked the plug. The creatures froze mid-motion, Sasquatches mid-stomp, their massive feet hovering above the trembling earth. Silver-skinned aliens pausing with their glowing orbs aloft, their tentacles quivering like reeds in a breeze. Gnomes halting their frantic juggling, their luminescent mushrooms suspended in mid-air. Dozens of eyes turned toward the friends, glowing coals in the Sasquatches' shaggy faces, multifaceted prisms in the aliens' elongated skulls, and glittering bead-like stares from the gnomes. The tiny UFOs above swiveled, their beams tightening into blinding pinpoints that seared through the fog, pinning the group like deer caught in a hunter's spotlight. The air grew heavy, thick with the cloying scent of overripe fruit and ozone, and a low hum vibrated in their bones, as if the meadow itself were holding its breath. Fear clawed at their throats, primal and paralyzing. Alex's knees buckled, his headlamp slipping askew as he stumbled back, his logical mind short-circuiting. This isn't possible," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, his glasses fogging with his rapid breaths. Jamie clutched her sketchbook to her chest like a talisman, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and fascination. Riley's hand instinctively reached for his belt, grasping for a gun that wasn't there. His outdoorsman's calm replaced by a taut readiness, his jaw clenched. Taylor, whose campfire stories had always danced on the edge of truth, stood frozen, her usual bravado replaced by a dawning realization that her stories had summoned something real. "Run!" Jamie yelled, her voice trembling, but her feet were rooted to the damp earth, as if the meadow's strange gravity held them there. Then a low rumble shook the ground, like the growl of a distant avalanche. A massive Sasquatch lumbered forward, his reddish mane glinting in the green firelight, his bulk casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the stars. He stood at least 7 feet tall, his fur matted with pine needles and streaks of clay, his eyes burning like embers beneath a heavy brow. Each step sent tremors through the meadow, dislodging pebbles that skittered like frightened insects. The friends braced themselves, hearts pounding, expecting a roar or a charge. Instead, the creature raised a paw-like hand, its claws glinting but held open in a universal gesture of peace. "Whoa there, humans," he rumbled, his voice a deep, gravelly resonance, like boulders grinding together in a riverbed, yet laced with a surprising clarity and a faint Pacific Northwest accent, as if he'd spent years eavesdropping on loggers in Quinault taverns. "The name's Gruck. Don't freak out. We're not here to eat ya, probe ya, or whatever nonsense you folks cook up about us in those spooky stories." The friends gaped, their mouths dry, words failing as their minds scrambled to process the impossible. Gruck chuckled, a sound like distant thunder rolling through the Cascades, his massive chest heaving. "What, you think we're the bad guys? Nah, we're just celebrating Halloween, same as you probably are." He gestured broadly at the meadow, where the other creatures began to relax, their frozen postures thawing. "This night's special. Portals open, the veil gets thin, makes it easy for my buddies from Zeta Reticuli to pop in." He nodded toward the silver-skinned aliens, who tilted their elongated heads in acknowledgement, their prismatic eyes shimmering.
And the gnomes? They crawl up from under the roots where the old magic lives. We throw a party like it's 1999. You know, that Earth archive of tunes the little green guys brought over a few decades back? Prince, Nirvana, all the classics. He grinned, revealing teeth like polished river stones. Your rumors and ghost stories, they're our best trick. Keeps you humans away from spots like this, especially tonight. Smart, right? Means we get the woods to ourselves.
The tension in the air began to ease, like a held breath released. The aliens chittered softly, a sound like wind chimes made of glass, while the gnomes resumed their scampering, their cackles high and mischievous. One of the aliens, its skin gleaming like liquid mercury, extended a slender arm, offering a holographic orb that fizzed with tiny star-like motes of light. "Would you guys like a drink?" it intoned, its voice a strange melodic hum that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate in their minds. A gnome, no taller than a toddler, with a beard braided with glowing lichen, tossed a luminescent mushroom toward Jamie. "Try it," he squeaked, his voice sharp and gleeful. "Tastes like candy, forest candy, not that processed junk you humans eat." Jamie caught it instinctively, the mushroom warm and pulsing faintly in her hand, its glow casting eerie shadows across her sketchbook. "Is this safe?" Alex asked, his voice still shaky, eyeing the mushroom like it might bite. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tick, and glanced at Riley, who was still poised as if ready to bolt. "I mean, no offense, but you're Bigfoot, and aliens, and gnomes. Fuck, this is a lot." Gruck's laugh boomed again, shaking the ground. "Safe? Kid, we've been eating these for centuries. It's not poison, just a good time." He leaned closer, his ember-like eyes narrowing playfully. "Hell, it might get you a little fucked up, but that's all," he said with a wink. "Besides, you humans are the ones with the weird food. Ever read the back of a Twinkies box?" Jamie, her curiosity overpowering her fear, sniffed the mushroom cautiously. It smelled like honey and moss, sweet but wild. "Screw it," she muttered, taking a tiny bite. Her eyes widened as a burst of flavor, sweet, earthy, with a fizz like Pop Rocks, flooded her mouth. "Holy crap, it's good," she said, a grin breaking through her fear. She passed it to Taylor, who took a tentative nibble, her usual swagger returning. "Okay, I'll admit, that's not bad," Taylor said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She turned to Gruck. "So, what's the deal? You guys just party here every Halloween? No humans invited?" Gruck shrugged, his massive shoulders rippling. "Usually, yeah. Humans tend to scream and run, or worse, bring cameras. But you lot seem chill. You didn't bolt when the saucers spotted you, so that's a point in your favor." He gestured to the bonfire, where the green flames flickered higher, casting shadows that seemed to writhe with faces and forms that weren't quite there. "Come on, join us. Share a story, dance a bit. Portals don't stay open forever." Riley, still wary, finally lowered his hand from his belt. "This is insane," he muttered, but a reluctant smile tugged at his lips as he watched a gnome juggle 3 glowing mushrooms with uncanny precision. "I mean, we came looking for something weird, right? This is next level." The music kicked back on, a pulsing blend of synths and drums that seemed to weave through the air like a living thing, pulling at their bodies. The aliens swayed, their tentacles tracing patterns that left trails of light, while the Sasquatches stomped in a rhythmic circle, their movements surprisingly graceful for their size. The gnomes darted between them, cackling and tossing spores that glittered like fireflies. Laughter, human, inhuman, and everything in between rippled through the meadow, and the friends, still dazed but enchanted, found themselves drawn in. Jamie, clutching her sketchbook, began sketching furiously, capturing the impossible scene. Alex, his skepticism crumbling, accepted the holographic drink, which fizzed against his lips like liquid starlight, leaving him dizzy with wonder.
Riley, loosening up, joined a gnome in a clumsy dance, his boots thudding alongside tiny, nimble feet. Taylor, ever the storyteller, swapped tales with Gruck, recounting her best campfire ghost stories, while the Sasquatch countered with tales of ancient forests and starbound travelers. As dawn approached, the portals began to shimmer, their edges fraying like torn fabric, casting prismatic light across the meadow. The music softened, the creatures slowing their dance, their forms growing translucent, as if dissolving into the mist. Gruck towered over the friends, his massive hand raised in farewell. "Come back next year," he rumbled, his eyes glinting with mischief. "But keep our secret, yeah? Don't need every hiker in the PNW crashing our rave." He winked, a gesture so human it was jarring, and turned back to the fading portal, his mane catching the first rays of sunlight.
The hike home was a blur. Their legs were heavy with exhaustion, and their minds were buzzing with the impossible. The forest seemed quieter now, as if it too were recovering from the night's revelry. The memory of the meadow, of Gruck's thunderous laugh, the alien starlit drinks, the gnomes' wild cackles burned in their minds, eternal and unshakable. In the Pacific Northwest, Halloween had just gotten a whole lot spookier and way more fun.